G'day, my name is Stephen Page and I'm talking to you about surrogacy and egg donation. Australia allows both surrogacy and egg donation, but there are limits, and those limits include with egg donation that there is transparency about the identity of the donor, so the child on turning 18 can find out the identity of the donor. And with both surrogacy and egg donation, that there isn't payment of a fee for the surrogate or the egg donor. It's okay to pay the expenses of both, but there are at times quite complex rules. There are offences relating to egg donors which are up to 15 years jail if it's commercial egg donation, or 6 months if there's a sale of tissue. And there are offences to do with surrogates. A difficulty from the law is that each state has its own rules, and with surrogacy in particular, those rules are different. In broad terms, however, in every state and the ACT, it is an offence to engage in commercial surrogacy. Currently, and this is August 2021, there are no laws in the Northern Territory concerning surrogacy, but in about a year's time, mid-2022, I anticipate that there will be similar rules there concerning surrogacy. Those who are looking at becoming parents through egg donation and surrogacy often are overwhelmed by what needs to be done, but I'll just say this: it's a case of when, not if, you become parents. It is a certainty that you will get there in the end, and this isn't just spin on my part. I'm a dad through surrogacy and egg donation. I've also suffered infertility. But why I say it's not spin is that since 1988, I have helped clients with surrogacy from throughout Australia, and at last count 31 countries overseas, and of course with sperm, egg and embryo donation. And I can say it's a certainty that you'll get there. There are 4 reasons you won't get there in the end, and they relate to if you die, or if you don't have enough money, and if you give up because you find it's too difficult, and then finally if evidently you need a donor and you're not prepared to use a donor. Because of the possibility that you might die, then I suggest that there should be some estate planning. I'm pleased to say none of my clients to date have died in this process, even though I've advised in about 1,700 surrogacy journeys. But it could happen, and you don't want to leave your child as a penniless orphan. So far as the cost can vary dramatically, and it could be as much as $300,000 or $150,000. It's quite a wide range in the United States for surrogacy, to undergoing surrogacy here in Australia, where the range is closer to $40,000 to $70,000. The cost for egg donation varies dramatically depending on whether you have an egg donor that you know, or you have to undertake it overseas. If you undertake egg donation or surrogacy overseas, then you need to take care with Australian law. In 3 jurisdictions, Queensland, New South Wales and the ACT, there is a clear ban in undergoing commercial surrogacy overseas. It's a criminal offence. And in 2 states, South Australia and Western Australia, it can be an offence in engaging in commercial surrogacy overseas, depending on how you do it. In 6 out of the 8 Australian states and territories, so everywhere but Victoria and Tasmania, it can be an offence to engage in overseas commercial egg donation. It is important to get expert legal advice in this area. If you're going overseas, then I would suggest that there are 7 rules that you should take into account. Rule 1, don't believe everything you read on the internet. It's very easy to pull out your phone, Google information and rely on that information. Time and time again, I've had to say to clients, that's not a good choice. You might have found it on your phone. This mob might say that they're wonderful in helping you, but in fact, you could have saved a lot of money going somewhere else and not have uncertain legal outcomes. Rule 2, what's legal there may result in jail here, and I described the offences. It is possible, for example, if you live in Sydney and you undergo egg donation in the United States, that if you don't do it carefully, you have committed an offence back home punishable by up to 15 years imprisonment. So it's really, really important to get that expert legal advice first before potentially putting yourself in harm's way. Rule 3, you say tomato. The old song, of course, you say tomato, I say tomato. In this area, there is an extraordinary amount of jargon. When you look at IVF, suddenly we're talking about ART, which is assisted reproductive treatment, or confusingly sometimes assisted reproductive technology or artificial reproductive technology. I just give you those simple examples to say what you might see yourself as, someone somewhere else, or even in your home place, might call you something different. You may see yourself as, for example, an intended parent, but lo and behold, under Victorian law, you would be called a commissioning parent. So that simple example might mean that while you think you're having a simple conversation with someone else, they might in fact be talking about something else. So it's important to just be aware that there is jargon in this area. Don't be overborne by it, but just know that there are sometimes variations in language and they apply across Australia as well as internationally. Rule 4, citizenship and residence are not the same. If you are going overseas, there are differences between whether you're an Australian citizen and an Australian resident, whether permanent resident or not. Again, it's important to get legal advice, and it's important to get that legal advice before you start. Rule 5, in different parts of the same country, different rules apply. Now, in Australia, as I said, we have 8 states and territories. We have different rules concerning surrogacy. Many Australians undertake surrogacy in the United States. For every child born in Australia via surrogacy, 3 are born overseas. More children are born to Australian parents through surrogacy in the United States than are born in Australia. So many Australians, when they're thinking about surrogacy in the United States, aside from the issue about whether it might be legal or not back home, look at California and say, well, it's legal in California, therefore those are the rules that apply across the US. And I give the US as an example, but I also mention Canada north of there. Both, like Australia, are federations. Each state and the District of Columbia in the United States has different rules concerning surrogacy. Similarly, in Canada, each province has different rules concerning surrogacy. There are better and worse places to undertake surrogacy in each place. And that is not only the rules over there that might apply, but also how they impact the rules here and whether your journey is criminal here or not. So again, it's important to get good legal advice here before you start. Rule 6, a birth certificate may not make you a parent. Looking at a birth certificate, it's fairly obvious. Well, if you're named as a parent, therefore you must be a parent. The basic premise of Australian law is that a birth certificate does not make you a parent. It is evidence of parentage, not proof of parentage. That's the same kind of approach that you would see, for example, in the US or Canada. It's different from what you might see in China, for example, where it is proof of parentage. And why that's important. Not only must you have it on the child's birth certificate that you are the parents, but you must also look at the fundamentals. Are you otherwise a parent under Australian law? And again, that's something you should get legal advice about at the beginning. And finally, Rule 7, there is insurance and there is insurance. It is important that your surrogate here has adequate life insurance and adequate income protection insurance, assuming of course that she is working. If she's not working, she can't get income protection insurance. The worst thing that could happen to your surrogate is that she dies. And what you don't want to have happen is, if that happens, and there's about a 1 in 16,000 chance of any woman who is pregnant in Australia and giving birth could die from the experience. So much higher odds than getting struck by lightning or winning lotto. But let's just take it at that there is a chance that could happen. You don't want to visit her death and make it worse upon her husband or partner and her children. If she doesn't have life insurance, then her children may find themselves thrust into poverty. You want to make sure that they're protected. Similarly, if you're undertaking a journey overseas, for example, the US or Canada, you must make sure that you have adequate insurance. And the insurance market in the United States in particular is enormously complex. There's got to be insurance about health matters for your surrogate and your newborn, and there has to be other adequate insurance. It is again important to get advice, and it is important to check that advice and get a second opinion, because if you don't get it right, the risk is yours and it will cost you a fortune. And I certainly don't want that to happen to you. Finally, it has been a privilege to speak to you today on behalf of the Australian Jewish Fertility Network. I think what the network does is wonderful, and I commend it to you. Good luck with your journey. Thank you.